Thanks for dropping in. This is 3D Printy. I'm Joe, and these are my 3D printed pin screens. And this is my newest design. After last week's video, two specific requests came up multiple times. People wanted to see a design that had square-shaped pins, and they wanted to see a design that had a lot more pins, a bigger size, or a higher resolution. This pixel version has 576 pins. I should mention that this is a surprisingly difficult print. Even though I had made two prior designs, this newer design introduced issues that I hadn't encountered before. Take, for example, this hex grid. All the holes are offset from each other, and that offset allows a good space between each hole. Compare that to the grid, which has very little space, only maybe 4 or 5 perimeters at most. Typically, when a 3D printer is laying down plastic around a small shape and reaches the end of that shape, it will perform what's called a retraction, something I mentioned in last week's video. A retraction pulls back a tiny bit on the filament, which relieves pressure in the nozzle slightly and prevents it from oozing out melted plastic all over everything you're printing. Now, if you are printing a whole bunch of these shapes one after another with very little space between it, the gears that push and pull the filament are going to run over the same area over and over and over again. And each time it does it, it can chew up a tiny bit of that filament. Ideally, you have the pressure on that filament very lightly so it's not grinding away much. But it's still grappling onto plastic, and you're going to lose some of that filament each time. And if that happens often enough, it actually might grind it away so bad that then it won't be able to push the filament out at all, and you'll get a clog. And that happened to me multiple times. I would check on the printer and find that I'd only gotten a couple layers into the print before it would fail, and I'd find the nozzle printing in midair, baking the filament inside the nozzle. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only issue. Even when I could get a complete print to finish, I had difficulty finding a good hole size that would allow the pins to slide cleanly through the holes without getting caught. You need a very smooth action on the pins for them to raise and lower reliably. After several days of trying, I eventually found a size that will allow the pins to slide through cleanly. But I still had the issue with retractions. To solve that, I tried something I'd never tried before. I turned retractions off entirely. And surprisingly, there was no significant ooze of the plastic. It printed cleanly and reliably. Next, I had to print 576 pins. Now, I'd printed quite a few pins for this project, as well as the other one, but this is significantly more. When printing on the print bed, especially if you have a long shape like this, cooling may often cause one end to curl up, and these needed to be straight. So to solve that, I started printing them in batches with a 1 layer tall rectangle connecting all the flimsy ends of each pin. Once the print was done, all I had to do was tear them right off. So, with this updated method for printing pins, a revised hole size, and altered retraction settings, or more to the point, disabled retraction settings, I was finally able to reliably print this design. As with the prior designs, I included several different spacers. These will allow this to work depending on what length bolts you use, whether or not you want to add a bit of plexiglass on top, whether or not you want to increase the space here for a more sturdy pen travel, or whether you want the footer to be shorter or taller. You'll notice that when I set this down, the pins are slightly elevated, so that makes the picture ever so slightly wobbly in this configuration. However, if I use the taller foot, that can kind of interfere with your hand getting in the way. so I chose to use the sort of small to medium size footer here for this design. If you look very carefully, you can find a few pins that are rotated 90 degrees or 180 degrees from the angle they're supposed to rest in the grid. This was a design of the pin that I abandoned after printing about 400 of them. And the pin designs that I include there are the updated pin design that doesn't let them rotate in the holes. And that's it for this design. I hope you like it. Although really, this is only a frame, and I look forward to seeing what designs people create. So until next time, thanks for dropping in.